Bright Tuty. Every student matters.
It's called consumer movement. Alright, it's a movement started by the consumers. Okay, now this movement arose or began because of the dissatisfaction of the consumers against the unfair trade practices by the sellers. So because of all the exploitations faced by the consumers over time, because they were seriously dissatisfied, the consumers began the consumer movement. Alright. Now earlier, there was no legal system available, there was no law, there was no policy to protect the consumers from exploitation, from any kind of exploitation. Alright, so when a consumer was not satisfied or happy with the product or the service of a brand, of a shop, of a company, then he or she would generally avoid that brand or that product or that shop and not go on to complain, because they did not know whom to complain, whom to go to in order to get some solution, right? So this kind of awareness, which is called consumer awareness, about if they face problem or if they're exploited, then how do we deal with it? This kind of consumer awareness, it took years to be created. It took years and a long time to begin a movement called consumer movement. Okay. So consumer movement is an organized and systematic movement which aims to safeguard, which aims to protect the interest of the consumers, and it is a recent phenomenon. This came into being, or this was started very recently. It is not an old movement. Okay. So this movement developed in late 1980s and early 1990s with the growing liberalization of economy. So the economy went through this process called liberalization. Okay, so during that time the consumer movement was also started. So modern declaration about the consumer rights was first made in America in 1962. So the rights of the consumers, right? The a law to protect the consumer's interest, consumer's right, that was first made in America in the year 1962, not anywhere in the world. Okay. Now this right had 4 basic consumer rights. This right provided 4 basic consumer rights to the people consuming the goods and services. They were right to choice, right to information, right to safety, and right to be heard. Okay, so these were the rights. Ralph Nader is considered to be the father of consumer movement. Okay, this person is considered to be the father of consumer movement, and March 15th or the 15th of March is considered and celebrated as the World Consumer Rights Day. Alright. Since 1991, our government or the Indian government gradually withdrew production activities and allowed the private sector to take over. So from 1991, the Indian government gave more power to the private sector to carry out productive activities, production activities, distribution of products, producing more products and goods and services. Okay. And during this period, there was also a great need that was felt among the people, among the government bodies, to enforce discipline and regulation in the market. It was realized that discipline should be maintained in how the market functioned. Okay, how the goods were produced, how it was distributed, how the people could buy it, how the people could sell it. That had to be done in a manner that it was properly controlled, properly managed. Okay, and there was also a new need which was felt by the people then, and that was need for consumer awareness, the need for the consumers to be aware of their rights, aware of their problems, aware of the cases of exploitation. Okay. So they had to be aware of market conditions as well as about health security aspects of goods. So these kind of awareness began to rise from the 1990s. Okay. So because of this awareness, now there was a feeling, there was a realization for implementing or for formulating a strong legal measure to protect the interest of the consumers. Alright, because of all these realizations that took place in the 1990s, people began to now feel that a policy, a law was required which would protect the interest of the consumers, which would protect the consumers from the exploitation of the traders, of the companies, of the sellers, of the shops, etc. Okay. 24th of December is regarded as National Consumers Day in India. Okay, that's the day which celebrates the consumers. Alright. On this day, the Indian Parliament passed the Consumer Protection Act in the year 1986. So the Indian government finally passed the law, and the law was called Consumer Protection Act. Okay. So the consumer movement has led to several things. Okay. It led to formation of various organizations which is locally known as consumer forums or consumer protection councils. Now this consumer forums or consumer protection councils, they provided guidance to consumers on how to file cases in the consumer court. They represented individual consumers in the consumer court. They basically helped the people to go to the court when they faced problems regarding the consumption of certain goods and services. Okay. Now people were ignorant. People didn't know how to go to the court, what to do. So these forums, consumer protection councils provided all kinds of assistance required by the people. So much so that they also represented or they also provide representation of the representation to the individual consumers who had issues, who faced problems and exploitations. Okay. So these consumer councils and forums, they receive financial support from the government for creating awareness among the people. So the consumer forums, they not only provide assistance to the consumers to file a case in the consumer court, but they also create awareness among the people. Okay, among the people about consumption, about consumers' rights. All right. So consumer movement in India has made some progress in terms of numbers of organized groups. So in India, consumer movement did make some progress because many organized groups, councils, forums were created. Okay. So more than 700 consumer groups in the country developed or were set up. Okay. But out of that 700 groups, only 20 to 25 are well organized and recognized for their activities. Only 20 to 25 are strong core organizations or groups. Okay. After the enactment of Consumer Protection Act, consumer awareness in India is surely spreading, but slowly. So after the Indian government enacted the Consumer Protection Act in the 1986, the consumer awareness in India did spread. Okay, people began to be aware about the consumers' rights and problems, but the spread was very slow. It was not rapid, it was not fast, it was not widespread. Okay. Because rules and regulations for working of markets, despite the implementation of the act, was not followed. The market did not follow rules and regulations. Okay. And consumers did not come together. Okay. And work out effectively for spreading the awareness. Alright. Because consumer awareness is a collective work. Is a collective work or effort One or two cannot make the awareness happen. Okay, the consumers, all the people have to come together, and then only the consumer awareness can be effective in making the people know about their rights when it comes to consumption of goods and services. Okay. Consumer Welfare Fund was created in the year 1992. Now this welfare fund, it provides financial assistance to promote and protect the welfare of the consumer, create consumer awareness and strengthen consumer movement in India, especially in the rural areas. So despite the problems faced by the consumer movement, Consumer Welfare Fund was created in 1992 and it provides financial assistance to encourage and to protect the welfare of the consumers, to create consumer awareness, to spread awareness and to strengthen the movement of the consumers in India, especially in the rural or the countryside. Okay. So because of how the consumers are exploited, right, the government also steps up, or the government also takes measure for their protection. So to protect the interest of the consumers, to make sure that they are not exploited, the government has undertaken the following three measures. The first one is called legislative measures. The second one is called administrative measures, and the third one is called technical measures. Let's look at the first one, which is the legislative measures. So the term itself, legislative, it means laws. Alright, so the government implemented Consumer Protection Act in 1986. This is popularly known as COPRA, Consumer Protection Act. Okay. Now this act provides for the establishment of consumer disputes redressal agencies at district, state and national level. So this act allows establishment of agencies which will address the needs of the consumers in case of them facing problems, and these agencies are established at various levels, which is district, state and the national level. So the district consumer forum is the level which is the agency which is set up in the district level. State Consumer Commission is the agency at the state level, and the National Consumer Commission is the agency at the national level. Okay, now these are popularly known as consumer courts. Okay, these are like courts, like how if there is a robbery, if there is some criminal activity, you go to the court to seek justice, right? So in a similar manner, when it comes to consumption and consumers' rights, then if you face any problem, if you have been exploited, then you go to consumer courts, and these consumer courts are at the district, state and national levels. Okay, the district level of the court deals with the cases involving claims up to rupees 20 lakhs. All right. The state level courts they take up the case or deal with cases that range between 20 lakhs and rupees 1 crore, and the national level court deals with cases involving claims exceeding 1 crore. Okay, so if you approach the district level court for your consumer for getting justice in terms of consumer rights, then if the case is dismissed in the district level, the consumer can appeal in the state and then in the national level of the court. Okay. Now this act, COPRA, was amended twice in 1991 and 1993. Okay, and it provides right to represent in the consumer courts. This makes sure that a consumer, when faced with problems, when exploited, can represent their grievances in the consumer court. They can go with their complaints, they can take their complaints and address it in the court and find solutions. Alright. So then the government also has implemented another act, which is Right to Information Act of 2005. Now this act ensures citizens all the information about the functions of the government departments. So this act allows the people, if they need proper information about how the government functions, alright, if the functioning of the government is fair or unfair, that information can be made available to the citizens, all citizens, irrespective of your caste, your religion, your community, etc. Okay. The second measure taken by the government is called administrative measure. Now, in the administrative measure, the public distribution system of the government, or the PDS, plays an important role. Now, the PDS ensures food security to the poor people. Okay, it makes sure that the poor people have sufficient and adequate amount of food grains for their sustenance. Okay, but alongside this, the PDS also helps in preventing hoarding and black marketing. We saw that how black marketing can cause exploitation among the consumers, right? So the PDS makes sure that such black market does not function, hoarding of goods and products do not take place. Hoarding means accumulating more than enough, okay? So how do the government try to do this? How do the government try to prevent hoarding and black marketing? So the government procures food grains and other essential items at predetermined prices from the farmers and sellers, traders, etc. Okay. Now prices at which the food grains, the products are purchased by the government, those prices are determined by Agricultural Costs and Prices Commission. So the government does not just give a price or does not give any amount of money. The price has to be determined with consultation of members at the Agriculture Costs and Prices Commission. Okay. Now after the purchase of the goods and products, they are stored and distributed among the people, especially the poor people. Okay, and the distribution takes place the distribution is done in such a manner that the poor people can avail of that product at a very reasonable price or at cheaper price than the market price. All right. So that system, the system of which the food grains and the products are distributed among the poor people, among the people at reasonable price, that is called rationing system. There are a lot of shops, ration shops, which are also known as fair price shops across the country, and through these shops the store items of food grains and other products by the government are then rationed or distributed to the people at a reasonable price. Okay. The third measure is called technical measure. Now how do the government do it? So government sets up institutions for fixing up the standards for products. To maintain the quality of the product, the government sets up institutions who makes sure that the quality and the standard of the products are maintained. Okay, so that institution is called Indian Standard Institution and its headquarter is in New Delhi. In short, it is called ISI. Okay. Now these institutions, they lay down the standards for industrial and consumer products. They put a limit, they put a proper description as to what should be the quality of the product, what should be the standard of the product, okay, used by the consumers. So by that they ensure the quality of the product. They make sure that it's of good quality that people are consuming. Okay. So logos and marks. Logos and marks are used to identify the quality and standard of the product. So logo like ag mark is used for agricultural products, and that means that that particular agricultural product has a high quality standard. Okay. So this scheme or the scheme to maintain the standard of industrial and consumer products, that is run by the Directorate of Marketing and Intelligence in the Ministry of Agriculture, Government of India. Okay, so products like honey, masala, spices, toothpaste, water bottles, everything, they carry such marks. The marks which identify the quality of the product. Okay, so here the products are honey, masala, spices, etc. Now this is in a national level. This is what happens in India. Now in the international level, there is something called, there is an institution called International Organization for Standardization, ISO. Now this institute is non-governmental. Okay, the institution in India is governmental, right? This institution is non-governmental. This was set up in the year 1947 and the headquarters is located in Geneva. Okay, so if you find companies or goods or any product that you purchase, and if it has a mark like ISO 6000, ISO 14000, then that shows that it has been approved by ISO for its quality. Okay, that means that the particular product or particular goods meet the standard or meets the specific level of standards which is maintained or which has been laid out by ISO. Okay, so but despite all these measures, despite the measures taken by the Indian government, despite the measures taken by the global body like ISO, qualities of the products and goods in the market continue to be bad. Not all are bad. There are good quality products, but at the same time, bad quality products continue to exist, and that goes on to create harassment to the consumers and also exploitation of the consumers. Now the next thing that we are going to learn is in Consumer International. So we learned about consumer movement in India, right? How the movement aims to protect the interests of the consumers in our country. Now Consumers International is similar body but on an international level. Okay, so Consumers International is an international body of the same consumer movement. Okay, they were created under the banner of the United Nations. Alright, not under the banner of any country, but under the banner of United Nations. In the year 1985, United Nations adopted the UN guidelines for consumer protection. So the UN created or formed or gave rise to the Consumers International, and as it did, it adopted guidelines, and these guidelines clearly stated how consumers' rights, consumers' interests need to be protected. Okay, it also created tools for nations so that they adopt measures to protect consumers and for consumer groups to force their governments to do so. So the UN not only adopted guidelines, but the guidelines were also given to different nations so that they also work towards and they also adopt measures for the protection of the consumers. And the same guidelines were also given to consumer groups so that they spread awareness and they also influence the government to take certain steps and measures for the protection of the interest of the consumers. So this created base for consumer movement at international level. Okay, so the initiatives of the UN created the base for consumer movement, but in a global level, in an international level. Okay, the Consumers International today has 240 organizations from over 100 countries under it. So there are 100 countries around the globe which has Consumer International organizations, and that number to 240 organizations. Okay. So with that, we have come to the end of this chapter.